The mahogany office fell silent except for the rustle of papers. Attorney Morrison's hands trembled as he opened the sealed file marked, "Confidential, Bethany Chen." My mother's face went white, then red with fury. "That file should not exist," she screamed, lunging forward. But it was too late. The secrets she'd buried for 23 years were about to destroy everything she'd built. And I was about to discover why she'd banned me from even discussing her funeral arrangements. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The smell of antiseptic and defeat hung in the air of Mercy General Hospital's waiting room. I'd been sitting in those uncomfortable plastic chairs for 6 hours, watching my mother, Patricia Chen, argue with doctors, nurses, and anyone else who dared suggest she might not recover from her third heart attack in 2 years. At 62, Mom was the kind of woman who treated illness like a personal insult. She'd built her real estate empire in Phoenix from nothing, clawing her way up from selling foreclosed homes to running the most successful luxury property firm in Arizona. Weakness wasn't in her vocabulary, and neither was surrender. "Samantha, stop looking at me like I'm already dead," she snapped from her hospital bed, yanking the oxygen mask away from her face despite the nurse's protests. "I've got 3 closings next week and the Henderson Mansion listing to finalize." I wanted to tell her that Henderson Mansion could wait, that maybe, just maybe, she should focus on not dying. But Patricia Chen had never listened to anyone in die. Her life, least of all her daughter. "Mom," the doctors said. The doctors said a lot of things. They said I'd never walk again after that car accident in '98. They said I'd never have children after the endometriosis diagnosis in '85. They've been wrong before. She pressed the call button aggressively. "Where's that cardiologist? I need to discuss my discharge plan." Dr. Williams appeared within minutes, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Chen, we've talked about this. Your ejection fraction is dangerously low. We need to keep you for observation and discuss long-term treatment options." "Long-term?" Mom's voice could have cut glass. "Doctor, I don't do long-term medical anything. Fix what needs fixing and send me home." I watched this dance between my mother and modern medicine, feeling like an intruder in her war against mortality. We'd never been close. Mom had always been too busy conquering the world to bother with the messy business of motherhood. I'd raised myself more than she'd ever raised me, learning early that Patricia Chen's love came with conditions and quarterly performance reviews. "Since we're discussing future care," Dr. Williams continued diplomatically, "have you considered updating your advance directives, making sure your affairs are in order?" The change in Mom's demeanor was instant and terrifying. The woman who'd faced down commercial developers and city planning committees went rigid, her face draining of color. "My affairs are perfectly in order, thank you." "Mom," I interjected gently, "maybe we should talk about what you'd want if—" "No." The word came out like a bullet. "Absolutely not. I don't want to hear about funeral plans, wills, or any of that. Morbid nonsense. And neither should you, Samantha. Those conversations are off limits." Dr. Williams exchanged a glance with me. "Mrs. Chen, it's actually quite healthy to discuss end-of-life preferences with family members. It removes the burden of guessing from loved ones during difficult times." I said no. Mom's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "And if anyone in this room thinks they're going to start planning my funeral while I'm still breathing, they're about to learn just how wrong they are." The weeks that followed established a new normal built on medical appointments, medication schedules, and a strange unspoken agreement that death was not a topic for discussion in the Chen household. Mom returned to work with the fury of someone proving a point to the universe. She closed more deals in her first month out of the hospital than most agents managed in a quarter. But I noticed things. The way she clutched the stair railing when she thought no one was looking. How she sat down heavily after standing too long. The prescription bottles she tried to hide in her purse. My mother was dying by degrees, and she was determined to take that secret with her to the grave. The subject of funeral planning became radioactive. When my Aunt Linda brought up the topic during a family dinner, Mom went nuclear. "Patricia, honey, I'm just saying it might be easier if..." "If what, Linda? If I plan my own funeral? If I pick out my own casket? If I write my own eulogy while I'm at it?" Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "I'm not dead yet, and I'm not planning to be anytime soon. But what if? There is no what if. There's what is, and what is that I'm going to outlive all of you out of pure spite if necessary." Linda tried a different approach. "What about Samantha? Shouldn't she know what you'd want?" The look Mom gave me could have frozen hellfire. "Samantha has no business making decisions about my funeral. None whatsoever. In fact, I forbid any discussion of the topic. Period." That night, after Linda had gone home and Mom had retreated to her study with a bottle of wine and a stack of property contracts, I found myself wondering what could possibly make someone so adamantly opposed to the normal conversations that death brings. It wasn't just denial. I'd seen denial. This was something else entirely. This was fear. But Patricia Chen wasn't afraid of anything. She'd told me so my entire life. The pattern continued for months. Any mention of death, funerals, or even basic estate planning sent Mom into rages that seemed disproportionate even for her. She fired her longtime attorney, Mitchell Brooks, when he suggested updating her will. She hung up on the funeral director, who called offering pre-planning services. She even banned me from watching certain TV shows if they dealt with death or funerals. "It's morbid," she'd say, snatching the remote. "Find something else." I started to feel like I was living with someone harboring a fugitive. The way Mom jumped when the mail arrived, how she screened every phone call, the way she'd go silent and pale whenever anyone mentioned lawyers, courts, or official documents. Something was eating at her from the inside, something bigger than heart disease. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October. I'd been helping Mom organize her office files, a task she'd been putting off for months, when I accidentally knocked over a box marked "Personal, Do Not Touch," legal documents scattered across the floor, property deeds, business contracts, insurance policies, normal stuff mostly. But there, wedged between a homeowner's policy and a commercial lease agreement, was a business card I didn't recognize. Morrison and Associates, attorneys at law, specializing in estate planning and family law. "Mom," I called, holding up the card. "Who's Morrison and Associates? I thought you said you didn't have a lawyer anymore." The sound that came from the kitchen wasn't quite human. Mom appeared in the doorway, her face the color of old paper, staring at the business card like it was a loaded gun. "Where did you get that?" "It was in your personal box. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and snatched the card from my hand. "This is exactly why I don't want you going through my papers. Some things are private, Samantha." "But Mom, if you have a lawyer, maybe we could talk about..." "No, absolutely not. And we're never speaking of this Morrison person again. Do you understand me?" I understood that my mother was terrified of something, and that something was connected to a lawyer I'd never heard of. What I didn't understand was why, or what could possibly be so damaging that it would make Patricia Chen, a woman who'd faced down everyone from tax assessors to mob-connected developers, look like she'd seen a ghost. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I Googled Morrison and Associates. The website was simple, professional, unremarkable. Thomas Morrison, senior partner. 30 years of experience in estate law, family disputes, and confidential legal matters. Nothing that explained my mother's reaction, but there was a phone number. And despite every instinct telling me to leave it alone, despite knowing that Patricia Chen's wrath was something to be avoided at all costs, I found myself dialing. "Morrison and Associates, this is Jennifer speaking." "Hi, I'm calling about..." "Well, this might sound strange, but I found your business card among my mother's papers." "Patricia Chen?" I was wondering if... The pause was so long I thought the line had gone dead. Hold, please. Classical music filled the line. My palms were sweating. I was about to hang up when a man's voice came through, careful and measured. This is Thomas Morrison. You said you're Patricia Chen's daughter? Yes, sir. Samantha Chen. I found your card and I was just wondering. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Ms. Chen, I think we need to meet. There are some things about your, mother's legal affairs that you should probably know. Things she's been postponing for quite some time. My blood turned to ice water. What kind of things? The kind we shouldn't discuss over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Say 2 o'clock? I should have said no. Should have respected Mom's privacy, honored her wishes, minded my own business. But the fear in her eyes when she'd seen that business card haunted me. Whatever Thomas Morrison knew about my mother, it was big enough to terrify the woman who'd never been afraid of anything in her life. I'll be there, I heard myself say. As I hung up, I had the distinct feeling I'd just lit a fuse on a bomb that had been ticking for 23 years. And tomorrow, I was going to find out exactly what my mother had been so desperate to keep. Buried. Morrison & Associates occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower in downtown Phoenix, the kind of building where serious money came to solve serious problems. The receptionist, Jennifer, led me through hallways lined with law books and framed degrees, past conference rooms where suited figures hunched over documents that probably decided fortunes. Thomas Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of steady gaze that suggested he'd heard every story the world had to offer. His office smelled like leather and old coffee, walls lined with certificates and what looked like 30 years of legal victories. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. I have to admit, I never thought I'd be having this conversation. What conversation, exactly? I still don't understand why my mother has your business card if she claims she doesn't have a lawyer. Morrison opened a thick file folder, revealing what looked like decades of paperwork. Your mother has been my client for 23 years. One of the most unusual cases I've ever handled, actually. My stomach dropped. 23 years. I was 25. Whatever this was, it started before I could even walk. She hired me in 2002 with very specific instructions. I was to maintain absolute confidentiality, never contact her directly, and only act if certain conditions were met. Morrison pulled out a legal document, the paper yellowed with age. One of those conditions was if her next of kin ever contacted me directly. Next of kin? But I'm her only... Exactly. His expression was unreadable. Ms. Chen, what I'm about to tell you may come as a shock. Your mother has been paying me a substantial retainer for over 2 decades to keep certain information sealed. Information that she was terrified you might discover. The air in the office felt thick, oppressive. What kind of information? Morrison hesitated, then pulled out another document. This one was newer, crisp white paper with official seals. Are you familiar with the name Rebecca Walsh? I shook my head. The name meant nothing to me. Rebecca Walsh was your mother's business, partner in the early days of Chen Properties. Before it became the empire it is today, it was Walsh and Chen Real Estate, 50-50 partnership. That's impossible. Mom always said she built the business from nothing, that she started alone with just a real estate license and determination. That's what she's told everyone for 23 years. But it's not true. Morrison opened the file wider, revealing photographs, contracts, bank statements. Rebecca. Walsh provided the initial capital, the office space, even most of the early client connections. She was the money behind your mother's ambition. My hands were shaking. What happened to her? That's where things get complicated. Morrison pulled. out what looked like police reports. In March 2002, Rebecca Walsh disappeared, vanished without a trace, left behind a daughter, a mortgage, and a thriving real estate business that suddenly belonged entirely to your mother. The room spun slightly. You're saying my mother had something to do with... I'm not saying anything definitive. But 3 days after Rebecca Walsh was reported missing, your mother came to my office with a very specific request. She wanted to ensure that if anything ever happened to her, certain documents would never surface. Documents that might raise uncomfortable questions about Rebecca's disappearance and the circumstances surrounding the dissolution of their partnership. Morrison spread out more papers across his desk. Bank transfers, property deeds, insurance policies. All dated within weeks of March 2002, all transferring ownership, assets, and client lists from Walsh & Chen Real Estate to Patricia Chen, sole proprietor. This is why she doesn't want to discuss funeral arrangements, wills, or estate planning, Morrison continued. She's terrified that any legal proceeding after her death will trigger an investigation into how she acquired the business. How she went from having nothing to owning everything in the span of a month. But if she didn't do anything wrong, then why hire me to keep it secret for 23 years? Morrison's question hung in the air like smoke. Why pay me $60,000 a year to maintain files that should never see daylight? Why create a legal structure specifically designed to prevent you from ever inheriting or managing her estate? The last part hit like a physical blow. What do you mean, prevent me from inheriting? Morrison pulled out the thickest document yet, bound in blue legal covers. Your mother's actual will, the one she never wants you to see, leaves everything to a charitable foundation. You get nothing. The house, the business, the investments, all of it goes to the Patricia Chen Foundation for Missing Persons. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Missing persons? Established in 2003. Ostensibly, to help families find their missing loved ones. In reality, it's been dormant for years, but it serves a purpose. It ensures that when your mother dies, her estate will be handled by trustees who have no connection to you and no reason to investigate the foundation of her wealth. I stared at the documents, trying to process what I was hearing. My mother, the woman who'd raised me with stories of her self-made success, had built her empire on the disappearance of her business partner, and she'd spent my entire adult life ensuring I'd never discover the truth. There's more, Morrison said quietly. Rebecca Walsh had a daughter, Emily Walsh. She was 8 when her mother disappeared. Where is she now? That's what your mother has been most afraid of. Emily Walsh is now 31 years old. She's a private investigator in Portland, and for the past 5 years, she's been systematically investigating her mother's disappearance. Morrison pulled out a newer folder, this one marked Urgent 2025. Inside were printouts of emails, newspaper clippings, and what looked like investigative reports. Emily Walsh has been getting close. Very close. She's identified your mother as the last person to see Rebecca alive. She's traced the financial transfers that happened after the disappearance. And she's filed requests with the police to reopen her mother's missing person case. The weight of it all was crushing. Does she know about me? Not yet. But she will. Part of her investigation involves tracing all of your mother's family connections, business relationships, and potential witnesses. Your name is going to surface eventually. Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying my face. This is why your mother won't discuss her funeral arrangements with you. She's not just planning to die. She's planning to take her secrets with her. The foundation, the sealed records, the confidentiality agreements. It's all designed to ensure that when Patricia Chen is gone, the truth about Rebecca Walsh stays buried forever. But you're telling me now. Because my instructions were clear. If her next of kin contacted me directly, I was to reveal everything. Your mother never anticipated that you'd find my business card. She certainly never thought you'd be curious enough to call. I sat in silence, trying to understand how my entire life had been built on a lie. The woman who'd taught me about hard work and determination had stolen her success from someone else. The mother who'd always seemed invincible was actually running scared from a secret that had been chasing her for over 2 decades. What happens now? Morrison gathered the documents, his expression grim. That depends on you. You could walk away, pretend this conversation never happened, and let your mother take her secrets to the grave. Or you could do what's right. Emily Walsh has been searching for answers about her mother for 23 years. You might be the only person who can give them to her. He handed me a business card, different from the one I'd found in Mom's papers. This one had a Portland address and a simple inscription: Emily Walsh, private investigator, specializing in cold cases. Think about it, Ms. Chen. But don't think too long. Your mother's health is declining, and if she dies before Emily Walsh gets her answers, this case goes cold forever. As I left Morrison's office, the weight of Rebecca Walsh's business card in my pocket felt heavier than the 15 floors I descended. I had a choice to make, and either way, it was going to destroy the woman who'd raised me. The question was whether Patricia Chen deserved to be destroyed by the truth she'd been hiding for 23 years. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 40 minutes after leaving Morrison's office, staring at Emily Walsh's business card until the black ink seemed to blur together. The air conditioning hummed, but I couldn't stop shaking. Every assumption I'd ever made about my mother, my childhood, our family's success, all of it was built on quicksand. The drive home felt like traveling through someone else's life. The familiar Phoenix streets, the desert landscape, even my mother's sprawling Scottsdale mansion, everything looked different when viewed through the lens of stolen prosperity. How many times had I walked through that front door, proud of what Mom had accomplished? How many dinner parties had I attended where she regaled guests with stories of her bootstrap success? Mom's Mercedes was in the driveway when I arrived, which meant she'd cut another doctor's appointment short. I found her in her study, bent over property contracts with the intensity of someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. She looked up when I entered, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? Recognition? "You're home early," she said carefully. "Had some errands to run downtown." I kept my voice neutral, but inside, my heart was hammering. Everything about her seemed different now. The way she held her pen, the defensive set of her shoulders, the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "How was your appointment?" "Fine. Dr. Williams is an alarmist. These medications are working perfectly." She shuffled the papers, clearly eager to end the conversation. "I'm making dinner reservations at Romano's for Friday. That client from Denver wants to discuss the Paradise Valley properties." We fell into our usual evening routine, but it felt like performing in a play where only I knew the script had changed. Mom talked about listings and market trends while I nodded and responded automatically, my mind racing through the implications of what Morrison had revealed. Every casual mention of her early career felt loaded with hidden meaning. Every story about building the business became a potential lie. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I searched my mother's name online, really searched, going back through decades of newspaper archives and business records. The official story was exactly what she'd always told me. Patricia Chen, immigrant success story, built a real estate empire through determination and hard work. The first mention of Chen properties in the Arizona Republic was from April 2002, a small business spotlight featuring a photo of Mom standing in front of her first office. But there were gaps, strange holes in the narrative that I'd never noticed before. No mention of previous business partnerships, no coverage of the transition from whatever she'd been doing before April 2002 to suddenly running a successful real estate company. It was as if Patricia Chen, the businesswoman, had simply materialized fully formed, like some capitalist goddess emerging from the desert. I dug deeper, searching for Walsh and Chen real estate. The results were sparse but telling. A handful of property, listings from 2001 and early 2002, all featuring both names, a Chamber of Commerce listing from 2001. And then, nothing. As if the company had simply evaporated. But the most disturbing discovery came when I searched for Rebecca Walsh herself. The missing person reports from March 2002 painted a picture of a woman who'd had everything to live for. Successful business, 8-year-old daughter, new home in Tempe, no history of depression or substance abuse, no debts or legal troubles. Rebecca Walsh had simply vanished from the parking lot of a Phoenix restaurant after what was supposed to be a business dinner with her partner. Her partner, Patricia Chen. The police reports were frustratingly brief, most of them redacted or summarized in the news coverage. But one detail kept appearing. Patricia Chen was the last person to see Rebecca Walsh alive. They'd had dinner at Casa Morales on March 15, 2002, to discuss business matters. Rebecca never made it home to her daughter. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, trying to reconcile the woman who'd raised me with the woman described in these reports. Mom could be ruthless. In business, absolutely. She could be cold, calculating, willing to do whatever it took to win. But murder? The disappearance of someone who trusted her? Sleep was impossible. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, remembering moments from my childhood with new eyes. The way Mom had always been paranoid about phone calls from strangers. Her insistence that we never talk to reporters, even for positive business coverage. The locked filing cabinet in her study that she claimed contained boring tax documents. The way she'd go rigid whenever true crime shows came on television. By morning, I'd made a decision. I called in sick to my job at the marketing firm and drove to the Phoenix Public Library, where I spent hours in the archives section, pulling every newspaper and business journal from 2001 and 2002. The picture that emerged was even more troubling than I'd imagined. Walsh and Chen Real Estate hadn't been a small startup. By early 2002, they were handling multi-million-dollar commercial properties and luxury residential sales. Rebecca Walsh had been the primary contact for their biggest clients, the one with the established relationships and financial backing. Patricia Chen had been the junior partner, ambitious but dependent on Rebecca's connections and capital. Then, in the weeks after Rebecca's disappearance, everything changed. Property titles transferred, bank accounts moved, client relationships shifted to Patricia exclusively. It was a complete business takeover, accomplished while the police were still searching for Rebecca Walsh. I found one article that made my blood run cold. From the Arizona Business Journal, dated April 30, 2002. Local businesswoman builds empire from tragedy. The piece featured Mom talking about how Rebecca's disappearance had motivated her to honor her partner's memory by growing their company into something Rebecca would have been proud of. The hypocrisy was staggering. Mom had built her public image on Rebecca Walsh's disappearance, presenting herself as the grieving partner carrying on their shared dream. When in reality, she'd systematically dismantled everything Rebecca had built and claimed it as her own achievement. By afternoon, I was sitting in my car outside Casa Morales, the restaurant where my mother had last been seen with Rebecca Walsh. It was still there, 23 years later, a family-owned Mexican place that specialized in business lunches and intimate dinners. I went inside and asked to speak with the manager. March 15, 2002? Maria Santos had been working at Casa Morales for 30 years, and her memory for significant dates was sharp. Oh, I remember that night. The police came back so many times, asking questions about the two women who had dinner here. Do you remember anything about them? About their conversation? Maria glanced around the nearly empty restaurant, then leaned closer. The one who disappeared, she seemed nervous. Kept checking her phone, looking at her watch. The other one? Your mother, you said. She was very calm, very controlled. They sat at table 12, over there by the window. She pointed to a Corner booth still set for two. I served them myself. The nervous woman, she barely touched her food. Your mother ordered dessert and wine, took her time. After the other woman left, your mother stayed for another hour, making phone calls. Rebecca left first? Oh, yes. She seemed upset when she got up to leave. Your mother didn't even stand up to say goodbye. Just watched her walk out. Maria paused, her expression troubled. I've always wondered what happened to that poor woman. She left her purse on the table and your mother had to run after her with it. The detail hit like a physical blow. Rebecca had been so distraught after their dinner that she'd forgotten her purse. And my mother had been the last person to handle it, the last person to see her before she vanished forever. I thanked Maria and sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot, trying to imagine that night. Rebecca Walsh, frightened and upset, walking out into this very parking lot 23 years ago. My mother followed with the forgotten purse. And then... What? Emily Walsh's business card felt like it was burning a hole in my wallet. Somewhere. In Portland, a woman my age was still searching for answers about what happened to her mother in this parking lot. Still hoping for closure that my mother had spent 2 decades ensuring she'd never get. I pulled out my phone and dialed the Portland number before I could change my mind. Emily Walsh Investigations. The voice was professional, but warm, with just a trace of Portland's laid-back accent. I almost hung up. Ms. Walsh? This is Samantha Chen. I'm calling about your mother, Rebecca Walsh. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Are you Patricia Chen's daughter? Yes. Jesus Christ. Her voice was barely a whisper. I've been waiting 23 years for this phone call. Don't hang up, Emily Walsh said quickly, as if she could sense my panic through the phone. Please, I know this must be overwhelming, but I need you to know that I don't blame you for what happened to my mother. I sat in the Casa Morales parking lot, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles had gone white. I don't even know what happened to your mother. But you're starting to figure it out, aren't you? Otherwise you wouldn't be calling me. Her voice carried a mixture of hope and exhaustion that spoke to decades of searching. Where are you right now? Phoenix, in the parking lot of the restaurant where they had their last dinner. Casa Morales. It wasn't a question. I've been there. Talked to the staff, measured the distances, studied the security camera angles. Well, where the cameras would have been if they'd had any back then. You've been here? 4 times in the past 3 years. The first time, I was just trying to retrace her steps. By the 4th visit, I was measuring how long it would take to move a body from the parking lot to the nearby construction sites that were active in 2002. The bluntness of it knocked the breath out of me. Emily Walsh wasn't just searching for her mother, she was investigating a murder. Ms. Chen, Samantha. Can I call you Samantha? Yes. I'm flying to Phoenix tonight. Can we meet tomorrow? My first instinct was to say no. Meeting Emily would make this real in a way that phone calls and internet research couldn't. It would mean crossing a line from which there was no return. Samantha? Are you still there? I'm here. This is all happening so fast. I've been moving slowly for 23 years. Fast is exactly what we need right now. Emily's voice softened. Look, I know your mother raised you. I know this is asking you to choose between loyalty and truth. But my mother raised me too, for 8 years, and she deserves better than disappearing into Patricia Chen's success story. I closed my eyes, seeing Rebecca Walsh's face in the old newspaper photos. She'd looked like Emily, I realized. Same dark hair, same determined expression. A woman who'd trusted the wrong partner. Where do you want to meet? Somewhere your mother won't see us. I'm assuming she doesn't know you've discovered any of this. She has no idea. Good. Let's keep it that way for now. Do you know the Heard Museum? It's public, but not somewhere she'd go for business. We arranged to meet at 10 the next morning. After I hung up, I sat in the parking lot for another 20 minutes, watching the dinner crowd arrive at Casa Morales. Normal people, living normal lives, unburdened by the knowledge that their mothers might be killers. The drive home felt like traveling through a dream. Mom was in the kitchen when I arrived, stirring something that smelled like her grandmother's. Recipe for pozole. For a moment, I could almost pretend we were just a regular family having a regular evening. "You look tired," she said without turning around. "Long day at work?" Something like that. She ladled soup into bowls, her movements efficient and precise. "I had an interesting phone call today. Mitchell Brooks, you remember my old attorney, he mentioned that someone had been asking questions about the early days of the business. My blood turned to ice. "What kind of questions?" "Oh, just nosy journalists, probably. You know how they get when they're working on some local success story piece. People always want to dig into the boring details." Mom set a bowl in front of me, her expression carefully neutral. "I told Mitchell that my past is my business, and anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with my current legal representation." She didn't mention that she'd fired Mitchell months ago. Didn't mention that she'd been trying to avoid lawyers entirely. The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that I wondered how many others I'd swallowed over the years. Mitchell thinks it might be worth having a conversation with this journalist just to control the narrative. Make sure they get the facts straight. Mom sat across from me, studying my face. "What do you think?" It was a test. I could feel it. She was watching for any sign that I knew more than I should, any indication that her carefully constructed world was starting to crumble. "I think your privacy is important," I said carefully. "If you don't want to talk to reporters, you shouldn't have to." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Exactly what I told Mitchell. Some stones are better left unturned. We ate in relative silence, but I could feel the weight of unspoken words filling the space between us. Every casual comment felt loaded with subtext. When she mentioned a new development project in Tempe, I wondered if it was anywhere near where Rebecca Walsh had lived. When she complained about a difficult client, I wondered if Rebecca had been a difficult partner before she disappeared. After dinner, I retreated to my room and researched everything I could find about Emily Walsh. Her private investigation business specialized in cold cases, missing persons, and what her website diplomatically called family mysteries. She had impressive credentials: former Portland police detective, specialized training in forensic accounting, a success rate that had earned her features in several true crime magazines. But it was her personal story that kept me reading. Emily had been 8 when her mother vanished, raised by her maternal grandmother until she turned 18. She'd joined the police force specifically to learn the skills she'd need to investigate Rebecca's disappearance. For 15 years, she'd worked on other people's cases while quietly building her own file on her mother's death. Because Emily Walsh was certain her mother was dead. Her website made that clear. Rebecca Walsh Missing Person Case. Working Theory. Homicide, March 15, 2002. I found her blog, updated sporadically over the past 5 years. The entries were clinical, professional, but the dedication was obvious. Emily had tracked down every person who'd known Rebecca in 2002. She'd analyzed financial records, studied property transactions, even hired experts to review the original police investigation, and she'd identified Patricia Chen as the prime suspect. The blog post from 6 months ago was titled, "The Partner Who Profited." It laid out the case methodically. The business partnership, the sudden wealth transfer after Rebecca's disappearance, the convenient timing of Patricia's rise to prominence. Emily had built a compelling circumstantial case, but she was missing the crucial elements that would interest prosecutors: witnesses, physical evidence, or someone close to Patricia willing to cooperate. Someone like a daughter who'd just discovered her mother's secrets. The next morning, I called in sick again and drove to the Heard Museum. Emily Walsh was already waiting by the entrance, and I recognized her immediately from her website photos. She was about my height, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she didn't miss much. "Samantha," she approached with a cautious smile. "Thank you for meeting with me." We found a quiet corner in the museum cafe, surrounded by Native American art and the low murmur of tourists. Emily spread out a thick folder on the table between us, the kind of organized case file that spoke to years of methodical work. "Before we start," she said, "I want you to know that I understand how difficult this must be. When I was 8 and my mother disappeared, I used to fantasize that she'd just run away to start a new life somewhere. It was easier than believing someone had hurt her." "But you don't believe that now." "No. My mother would never have left me. She was planning my 9th birthday party when she disappeared, had already bought the decorations, ordered the cake. Rebecca Walsh didn't run away, Samantha. Someone took that choice from her." Emily opened the folder, revealing photographs, documents, and what looked like a complex timeline. "I'm going to show you what I've learned about the night your mother and mine had dinner. But first, I need to ask you something important." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "Are you prepared to learn that the woman who raised you might be a killer?" I thought about the past 2 days, the lawyer's revelations, the research, the growing certainty that my entire life had been built on someone else's grave. "I think I already know," I whispered. Emily nodded grimly. "Then let me show you how." She did it. Emily's hands moved across the documents with practiced precision, laying out 23 years of investigation like pieces of a complex puzzle. The first photograph she placed on the table made my stomach lurch. It was Rebecca Walsh's car, a blue Honda Civic, found abandoned in a Walmart parking lot 3 miles from Casa Morales. The official theory was that someone followed her from the restaurant, carjacked her, and dumped the vehicle, Emily explained, her voice clinical despite the personal nature of the evidence. But there were problems with that theory from day one. She pointed to a police report. No signs of struggle, in or around the car. Keys were still in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat with cash and credit cards untouched. Her cell phone was on the floor, but the battery had been removed. Someone who knew to disable the phone's tracking? Exactly. This wasn't a random crime, Samantha. This was planned. Emily pulled out a map of Phoenix, marked with red circles and arrows. Your mother told police that Rebecca left Casa Morales upset around 9:30 p.m. Security footage from the Walmart shows the Honda being abandoned at 11:15 p.m. That's less than 2 hours. An hour and 45 minutes to be exact. Plenty of time to drive from Casa Morales to a secondary location, do what needed to be done, and abandon the car. Emily's finger traced a route on the map. But here's what the police missed in 2002. There was major construction happening all along this corridor. 3 different sites where someone could dispose of a body without it being discovered for months, if ever. She spread out construction permits, contractor schedules, and geological surveys. The level of detail was staggering. Emily had researched every piece of disturbed earth in the Phoenix metro area from that time period. The Meridian office complex was the most likely spot. They were digging foundations for a 20-story tower, working around the clock to stay on schedule. Someone with construction knowledge, or access to someone who did, could have disposed of evidence there permanently. My mouth felt dry. Did Mom know about construction? Better than that. She had a relationship with Garrett Construction, the company building Meridian. They'd worked together on several real estate deals. Emily pulled out business records. In fact, Patricia had a meeting scheduled with Tom Garrett the morning after Rebecca disappeared, supposedly to discuss a new project. The web of connections was becoming clearer and more horrifying. Mom hadn't just killed her partner. She'd planned it meticulously, with contingencies and alibis that had fooled police for over 2 decades. There's more, Emily continued. The insurance angle. She produced a thick stack of insurance documents. Rebecca had a $2 million life insurance policy through the business, standard for partners in a successful company. But here's the interesting part. The policy had a key person clause that would pay out to the surviving partner if Rebecca died or was declared legally dead. Mom collected on Rebecca's death? Not immediately. She was smart enough to wait. Filed the claim in 2005, after Rebecca had been legally declared dead. By then, she'd established herself as the grieving partner who'd built the business into Rebecca's memorial. The insurance company paid without question. I stared at the documents, feeling sick. Every detail of Mom's success story was tainted, with Rebecca's blood. The office building, the luxury cars, the Scottsdale mansion. All of it purchased with money that should have gone to Emily. Why didn't the police investigate her more thoroughly? Emily's expression darkened. Because Patricia Chen was very good at playing the victim. She hired Marcus Webb. You know the name? I did. Webb was Phoenix's most expensive defense attorney, the kind of lawyer who charged $1,000 an hour and had never lost a high-profile case. Webb convinced the police that Patricia was being unfairly targeted because she was the obvious suspect. He threatened lawsuits, brought in character witnesses, even had her take a polygraph test. She passed? Polygraphs can be beaten if you know how, and Marcus Webb knew how. Emily pulled out more documents. But here's what's really interesting. Webb's retainer was paid not by Patricia, but by someone called Phoenix Holdings LLC. She showed me corporate filings. Phoenix Holdings was a shell company, created 3 days after Rebecca disappeared and dissolved 6 months later. Its only purpose was to pay Marcus Webb's legal fees and ensure Patricia had the best representation money could buy. She set up the shell company? Someone did. Someone who knew that Patricia Chen was going to need an expensive lawyer before she'd even been officially considered a suspect. Emily leaned back in her chair. That level of premeditation suggests this wasn't a crime of passion, Samantha. This was execution. I thought about the woman who'd raised me, trying to reconcile the mother I knew with the calculating killer Emily was describing. But the more I learned, the more it made sense. Mom's legendary business acumen, her ability to think 10 steps ahead of competitors, her ruthless pragmatism, all of it could have been applied to murder just as effectively as real estate. There's something else, Emily said quietly. Something personal I need to tell you. She pulled out a photograph I hadn't seen before, Rebecca Walsh at what looked like a birthday party, laughing as a young Emily blew out candles on a cake. My mother was planning to leave the partnership. She'd discovered some irregularities in the business finances, money being moved around, clients being charged inflated fees, properties being flipped through shell companies to hide profits from the IRS. Mom was embezzling? From the business, from clients, probably from Rebecca personally. My mother had been documenting everything, building a case to present to their accountant and potentially the authorities. Emily's voice cracked slightly. She was going to confront Patricia that night at dinner, give her a chance to make things right before involving lawyers. The final piece clicked into place. Rebecca hadn't just been a partner. She'd been a threat to everything Patricia was building, a threat that had to be eliminated. Rebecca brought copies of all the financial evidence to that dinner, Emily continued. Bank statements, forged, documents, records of fraudulent transactions. The police never found any of it. Patricia Chen made sure of that. How do you know all this? Emily smiled sadly. Because my mother was careful. She made copies of everything and hid them in a place she knew I'd eventually find. She pulled out a safety deposit box key. She left me a letter too, explaining what she'd discovered and what she planned to do about it. The letter was dated March 14th, 2002. The day before she died. She handed me a photocopy of a handwritten note. Rebecca's final words to her daughter, written just hours before her confrontation with Patricia Chen. Emily, if something happens to me, look for the truth in what Patricia has built. She's not the woman I thought I knew, and I'm afraid I may have trusted the wrong person with too much. The evidence is in the downtown box, account 4477. Use it to make sure justice is served. I love you always. Mom. I read the letter twice, my hands shaking. She knew she was in danger. She knew Patricia was dangerous. What she didn't know was just how far Patricia would go to protect her secrets. Emily gathered the documents back into her folder. For 23 years, I've been building this case piece by piece. Financial records, witness statements, expert analysis of the crime scene. I have everything except the one thing that would make prosecutors pay attention. What's that? Someone close to Patricia Chen willing to testify about what she's capable of. Someone who's seen her true nature, who knows about her past, who can speak to her character and motivations. Emily looked directly at me. Someone like her daughter. The weight of what she was asking settled over me like a physical force. She wanted me to betray the woman who'd raised me, fed me, put me through college, and given me every advantage in life. She wanted me to help destroy Patricia Chen's legacy and send her to prison for murder. I need time to think about this. I understand. But Samantha, there's something you need to know. I'm not the only one asking questions anymore. Emily's expression grew grave. The Phoenix police have reopened Rebecca's case. New detective, fresh eyes, modern investigative techniques. They're going to be looking at Patricia Chen very closely over the next few months. What does that mean? It means the truth is coming out whether we control it or not. The only question is whether you want to be on the right side of it when it does. As I drove home from the museum, Emily's words echoed in my head. The right side. But what was right when it meant destroying the woman who'd given me everything, even if she'd stolen it from someone else first? That evening, I watched Mom prepare dinner with new eyes, seeing not the successful businesswoman she'd always appeared to be, but the careful architect of a 23-year cover-up. Every movement seemed calculated, every word measured for its potential to reveal or conceal. She was good at this. Disturbingly, masterfully good, and I was about to find out just how dangerous that made her. 3 days after meeting Emily, I made the decision that would shatter both our lives forever. I was going to tell Mom everything, not to warn her, not to give her a chance to run or destroy evidence. I was going to confront her with the truth and force her to face what she'd done to Rebecca Walsh, what she'd stolen from Emily, what she'd built our entire family legacy on. Maybe it was naive. Maybe I believed that somewhere inside the woman who'd raised me was enough humanity to feel remorse for what she'd done. Or maybe I just needed to see her reaction when the mask finally came off. I chose a Thursday evening when she was relaxed, reviewing contracts in her study with a glass of wine, the same room where she'd hidden Morrison's business card, where she'd spent 23 years managing the lies that kept her secret buried. Mom, we need to talk. She looked up from her papers, immediately alert to something different in my tone. Patricia Chen hadn't survived this long by missing subtle changes in her environment. What about, sweetheart? I sat down across from her desk, the way I had 1,000 times before when discussing school, work, or family plans. But this time, I placed Emily's folder on the polished mahogany surface between us. About Rebecca Walsh. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers, red liquid spreading across the contracts like blood. Where did you get that name? Her voice was barely a whisper. From your lawyer. From Emily Walsh. From police reports. From 23 years of lies, Mom. She stared at the folder as if it might explode. Samantha, you don't understand what you're dealing with. There are things about the past that are better left alone. Better for who? For you? Because they're certainly not better for Emily Walsh, who spent her entire adult life searching for her mother. They're not better for Rebecca, who trusted you and ended up dead. Dead? Mom's voice cracked. Who said anything about dead? Rebecca Walsh is missing. She ran away. Left her daughter, left the business, left everything behind because she couldn't handle the pressure. Even now, faced with evidence, she was still lying. still protecting the story she'd told herself for over 2 decades. I opened Emily's folder and spread the documents across her desk. Financial records, construction permits, insurance claims, witness statements. 23 years of methodical investigation laid out in undeniable detail. She didn't run away, Mom. You killed her. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. For a moment, Patricia Chen sat perfectly still, her face a mask of calculated control. Then something inside her snapped. You have no idea what you're talking about. She swept her arm across the desk, scattering papers to the floor. Rebecca, Walsh was trying to destroy everything I'd worked for. She was going to ruin both of us over some accounting irregularities that could have been resolved privately. Accounting irregularities? You were embezzling from your own clients. I was managing cash flow. Rebecca was too naive to understand how real business works. She wanted to involve auditors, lawyers, the IRS. She would have destroyed both our careers over paperwork. Mom stood up, pacing behind her desk like a caged predator. I tried to reason with her that night, tried to explain that we could fix everything without involving outsiders. But she wouldn't listen. She had all these documents, these accusations. She was going to destroy everything the next day. So you destroyed her instead. I protected us. I protected our future, our business, everything we'd built together. Her voice rose to a shout. Rebecca was going to throw it all away over money that didn't even matter. It mattered to her daughter. It mattered to Emily, who was 8 years old when you murdered her mother. I didn't murder anyone. Mom slammed her hand on the desk. It was an accident. We argued in the parking lot, and she fell. Hit her head on the concrete. I panicked. The admission hung between us like a confession and a lie simultaneously. Even in her breakdown, Patricia Chen was still managing the narrative, still trying to minimize her culpability. And then what? You just happened to have access to construction equipment to bury her body? Her eyes went wild, darting around the room as if looking for escape routes. Tom Garrett owed me favors. I called him, told him there had been an accident. He helped me clean up the situation. You mean he helped you dispose of Rebecca's body? He helped me avoid a scandal that would have destroyed both our families. She was shouting now, all pretense of control abandoned. Do you have any idea what would have happened if the police had found Rebecca in that parking lot? The investigation, the media attention, the business falling apart? Emily would have lost everything. The twisted logic was staggering. In Patricia Chen's mind, she'd done Emily a favor by covering up her mother's death, had somehow protected an 8-year-old girl by orphaning her and stealing her inheritance. You collected $2 million in insurance money. That money built this company. It secured our future. It paid for your education, this house, everything you've ever had. Mom's voice cracked. I did it for us, Samantha, for our family. We're not a family built on Rebecca's grave, Mom. We're a lie built on her murder. The word murder seemed to break something inside her. Patricia Chen collapsed back into her chair, her face crumpling into something I'd never seen before, genuine despair. She was going to take everything, she whispered. The business, the clients, the reputation I'd worked so hard to build. She was going to leave me with nothing but scandal and bankruptcy. So you left her with nothing but a grave. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 23 years of deception settling between us like dust. Finally, Mom looked up at me with eyes that seemed decades older than they had an hour before. What happens now? Emily wants justice. The police have reopened the case, and I'm going to help them find it. You're going to testify against me. I'm going to tell the truth. Finally. Mom nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting this moment. Her entire life. Morrison warned me this day would come. Said secrets like this always surface eventually. He's been waiting for this conversation for 23 years. And so have I, if I'm being honest. She looked around her study, at the awards and photos and evidence of the empire she'd built on blood money. Some nights, I'd dream about Rebecca. She'd ask me why I took her daughter's mother away. I never had a good answer. Because there isn't one. The next morning, I called Emily and told her I was ready to cooperate with the investigation. Within a week, Phoenix police detectives were sitting in Morrison's office, listening to the recordings I'd made of Mom's confession and reviewing Emily's meticulously assembled evidence. Patricia Chen was arrested on a Tuesday morning, led away from her office in handcuffs while her employees and clients watched in shock. The local news ran the story that evening. Real estate empire built on partner's murder. The trial lasted 4 months. Mom's defense team tried to paint it as a tragic accident, a moment of panic that spiraled out of control. But Emily's evidence and my testimony painted a different picture. Calculated murder followed by decades of careful cover-up. Tom Garrett, faced with his own charges as an accessory after the fact, eventually testified about helping Patricia dispose of Rebecca's body. The construction site at Meridian Office Complex was excavated, and Rebecca Walsh's remains were finally found, 24 years after she'd vanished from a restaurant parking lot. Patricia Chen was convicted of second-degree murder and insurance fraud. She received 25 years to life. I testified at her sentencing hearing, not as her daughter seeking leniency, but as a witness to the truth. I told the court about the woman who'd raised me, fed me, educated me, and loved me in her own complicated way. But I also told them about Rebecca Walsh, the woman whose murder had paid for every advantage I'd ever received. My mother built an empire, I said, looking directly at Patricia in her orange jumpsuit. But empires built on graves don't last. The truth always finds a way to surface, and the dead always find a way to speak. Emily was in the courtroom that day, sitting in the front row where her mother should have been for the past 24 years. After the sentencing, we walked out together into the Phoenix sunshine. "Thank you," she said simply. "I should be thanking you. You gave me the chance to do the right thing." We both did the right thing. Finally. The Chen Properties empire collapsed within months of Mom's arrest. The scandal destroyed client relationships, triggered investigations into every deal Patricia had ever made, and revealed a pattern of fraud that stretched back decades. Emily inherited what remained of her mother's original investment, finally, receiving the money that should have been hers as a child. I moved to Portland 6 months later, leaving Phoenix and the wreckage of my family's legacy behind. Emily and I became unlikely friends, bonded by the strange circumstance of being the daughters of a murderer and her victim. Sometimes I visit Mom in prison. She's older now, grayer, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the knowledge that her life's work has been exposed as an elaborate fraud. We talk about books, about the weather, about anything except the past. But sometimes, in unguarded moments, I catch her staring at nothing with an expression that might be remorse. On those days, I think Patricia Chen finally understands what she stole when she killed Rebecca Walsh in that parking lot 24 years ago. She didn't just steal a life. She stole a mother from her daughter, a future from her victim, and, ultimately, a soul from herself. The truth always surfaces eventually. And some secrets are too heavy to carry to the grave, no matter how carefully you plan your funeral. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.